After entering the romance simulation, I ended up with a stoic, emotionally restrained boyfriend. We spent a quiet lifetime together. On his deathbed, he held my hand and said, "Emma, in the end, it was you who stayed with me. That's not so bad." He had no regrets. In the end, he chose me over his first love, and he was content that I had arranged every part of his life and career so neatly. But I could hear the compromise hidden in his words. I grew tired of being someone's second best. So when I returned to the year I turned 20, I asked myself, would I be willing to live the same life again? The answer was no. I chose to walk away from him. Chapter 1. I was married to Luis for 70 years. He passed away at the age of 100. With a faint smile on his lips, I stood up and looked out the window, thinking, if there's a next life, I don't want to be Luis's wife again. When I opened my eyes, what I saw outside was a campus lined with phoenix trees. Suddenly, a piece of chalk hit me. "Emma, repeat what I just said." I stood up and saw the aerodynamics professor standing at the podium, frowning at me. Someone teased, "Professor, she's not in our class. She's just here to accompany her boyfriend." The professor gave me a long look and turned back to write on the board. That's when Luis, beside me, suddenly said, "She's not my girlfriend." Silence fell over the room. My heart was pounding. At this time, Luis was still young, sharp-featured, reserved, but already had that unnerving calmness and self-discipline. He had always been cold and aloof, and it was this flash of brilliance that first caught my eye. But even now, he was the same as before, indifferent and unkind, letting awkwardness crash over others alone. I smiled slightly. So, he hadn't changed at all. I said, "That's right, Professor. I'm neither his girlfriend nor a student in your class. Sorry for interrupting. I'll leave now." Luis hesitated with his book. But when I moved toward the door, he blocked the way without saying a word. After class, the professor called me aside. Before saying anything, she tapped my head and sighed. "You really like him that much? Can't you see he doesn't care?" I nodded. "I can see that, Auntie. I won't audit your class anymore." She didn't believe me at first, but after double-checking, she let me go and returned to her office. Someone called out to me from behind. It was Helen, jogging over with a smile and throwing her arm around my shoulder. "Emma, want to grab popsicles? The new mung bean ones are delicious, my treat." I shook my head. Helen pouted dramatically, then quickly changed her tactic. "Then come to my place. We just got a new color TV. The picture's super sharp. I'll play Jeff Chang's Too Much Love for you." She made a fist like a fake mic, singing the lyrics. "I let you go, let you indulge, thinking someday you'd be moved." I smiled faintly. "I'm going abroad soon. There's a lot to prepare. I won't be hanging out much." Helen clung to my arm, startled. "What? When? Why so sudden?" I smiled and said gently, "You'll be fine. You and Luis can hang out now. No third wheel anymore." Helen's hand slowly dropped. Her smile faded. When I looked up again, Luis was leaning against the door frame not far away, his head tilted against the wall. He turned to look at us when he heard the conversation. "Let her be," he said. "She can do whatever she wants." He walked up, took the bag from Helen's hands, and added without glancing at me, "Troublesome." The words pierced my heart, every syllable like a thorn. Even after 70 years, it had been a long time since I'd heard something so sharp. Back then, I would have done anything to soften those thorns, until they melted into me, painful, but bearable. I asked, "Aren't you going to ask when I'm leaving?" Luis scoffed. Helen interrupted before he could reply. "Emma, when are you going? Why so sudden?" I lifted my hand to shield my eyes from the sunlight, gazing down the corridor. When the phoenix trees turn color, I said, "It won't be long." Chapter 2. After that, I stopped going back to school. The decision to study abroad was sudden, but preparing everything I needed took a lot of time. One afternoon while I was doing research in the study, my aunt knocked on the door and said, "My star student's here to visit me. He said it's just a quick hello, but he's not leaving. Come out and see him?" I chuckled. "Just leave the door open. Aunt, you go back to prepping your class. Though it was early summer, the sound of cicadas could be heard now and then, but no footsteps ever approached the room. By the time I looked up from the screen, the sky outside had darkened. I walked out into the living room. Luis was gone, as if he'd never been there. The golden sunset spread across the floor like a painting, but it only made the place feel more empty. Over the next few days, I finalized my destination for studying abroad. I'd grown up with my aunt. My parents had left me money but lived their own lives. In my previous life, I never saw them again, not once, even till the very end. But they never interfered with me. So in a way, I was always free. When I told my aunt where I was headed, she said, "That's a great country. Their aerospace tech is top-notch right now." Luis asked where you were going to. It's rare for him to show interest in others. Did you tell him yourself? I smiled. Auntie, weren't you always the one upset about me clinging to Luis? Didn't you even tell me not to call you aunt at school? Because you felt embarrassed? She sighed. My biggest fear is that you're just acting on impulse. If you've truly made up your mind, then don't regret it later. I won't, Auntie, I replied. The next day, I made a quick trip back to school. I ran into a few classmates, and it turns out news of me studying abroad had already spread. As I was packing in the dorm, one of my roommates clicked her tongue. Emma, didn't you say you don't have parents? How can you even afford to study abroad? My dad says people who can do that are 1 in a million. Are you really going overseas? Exchange program? Sure, your grades are good, but not that good. It just sounds too unbelievable. I picked up a trendy t-shirt, looked at it front and back, then tossed it straight into the trash. Her outstretched hand froze midair. I asked, Helen didn't tell you? The shirt's not for you. She probably promised you some benefit, right? She stammered. No, Emma, I swear. Helen didn't tell me to say anything. She didn't offer me anything either. Oh, I smiled. So you're just naturally shameless? I grabbed my packed luggage and headed out. She followed behind nervously. At the dorm door, I paused and raised a finger as if pointing through the air. I always thought there was a thief in our dorm. My stuff kept disappearing. Let's see which beggar shows up to take the clothes from the trash. Her face paled. She turned back and threw herself onto the desk, sobbing. I stepped out of the dorm. What a beautiful day. Autumn must be just around the corner. But before autumn arrived, someone else did, uninvited. At the school gates, someone reached out and took my suitcase. You're going to Michigan? I thought you were majoring in international relations. So you're not planning to follow your parents' footsteps anymore? I was surprised. Luis had clearly heard things about me that I hadn't even had time to share. I said, no, they're too carefree for me. Maybe I'll still meet them, not as a diplomat, but as the person who designed the plane they're flying on. Isn't that still a kind of reunion? The suitcase suddenly slipped from Luis's hand, and everything spilled onto the ground. Hardshell cases are really not that convenient. I crouched down to gather my things. Luis kicked the suitcase in frustration. All this crap is worth coming back for. But saying goodbye to me isn't? I looked up and said, with what identity should I say goodbye to you, Luis? Chapter 3. Luis was a bit confused. In our previous life, we didn't get together until 5 years later. In the year of the millennium, by then, we had already graduated. Helen had gone abroad to study and ended up marrying a wealthy American businessman. Soon after, Luis proposed to me, even though we hadn't seen each other for 3 years since graduation. I said yes without a second thought. Back when I didn't value myself, I thought time could conquer everything. As long as Luis was mine, we'd have all the time in the world to slowly grow closer, even to make him fall in love with me. But reality proved that 70 years still weren't enough. And yet, just a few days after my rebirth, once I stopped circling around Luis, I started noticing signs I had once desperately dreamed of, but I didn't believe them. Luis couldn't possibly have feelings for me, at least not now. He just wasn't used to the change. Before Luis could say anything, I asked, Luis, you're the only one who knows my parents are diplomats, right? Everyone else always assumed I was an orphan. with no family, no ties. Take Helen, for example, who was walking toward us just then. Louise frowned in irritation. I never told anyone. Didn't you always hate talking about family stuff with others? Exactly. Between us. Only Helen assumed I had no parents. Louise furrowed his brows slightly. What are you trying to say? Helen hasn't said anything about you. You should trust her. Everyone thought Helen and I were best friends. She was the one person expected to keep my secrets. I didn't respond. Helen waved at us with a smile, her skirt fluttering as she ran over. I took a step back, hurriedly shoved everything into my suitcase, then dumped it next to the trash bin, without another word. I turned and walked out of the school gates. The news about me going abroad kept spreading. More and more people reached out, some with envy, some with opportunistic hints like, "Don't forget us when you're rich." Eventually, someone even suggested a farewell party in the dimly lit KTV room. Louise sat silently in the darkest corner, exuding an aura that warned others not to come near. Flashing lights danced across the room. When I walked in, everyone erupted into cheers. Welcome the first exchange student from our department. Come on, the star of the night is finally here. Our future Ivy League girl. Sing us a song before you leave and forget us. You're going to America, right? You'll have to speak English there. How about an English song? Huh? I scanned the room. Plenty of familiar faces. Most of them were Helen's exes, and their friends. I took the microphone and smiled calmly. I'll sing a Chinese song, just learned it recently, before anyone could make things difficult. I picked the track myself. When I reached the line, if it's love, don't dodge the truth, be brave enough to face it. Luis shifted slightly in the shadows. The strands of hair falling over his forehead obscured his expression. Earlier in the song was another line. I wish I could give you one more chance. I wish I could ask who you truly love, but he didn't react. Three people caught in a web of feelings. It's time for mine to fade quietly into the dark. As the song ended, someone paused briefly, then took the lead clapping. I walked to the sofa booth, opened a bottle of soda, and tilted my head back to take a sip. The liveliness in the private room resumed. They seemed to have forgotten the original reason for the gathering, rushing to grab the mic one after another. All sorts of off-key voices drifted out with odd flourishes, drawing the occasional chuckle. Suddenly, Luis spoke up. Emma, you said if you love someone, you should be brave, right? I didn't hesitate. Yes, whether you love or don't, it's all the same. His gaze settled on Helen, who was now surrounded by a group of guys, glowing in the center of the crowd. So it's okay that she's had so many boyfriends, right? She just changes boyfriends often, but she's never crossed any moral lines. I've always believed she's simply someone who loves passionately. Luis turned to look at me. That's why I don't believe she would have leaked your secret. Even this party, even if she had something to do with it. I don't believe she meant any harm. Emma, I never took you for someone who'd hint and accuse like this. This time, I'm really disappointed in you. I swirled the half-empty orange soda in my hand. So what? What now? What? Luis, you've always known I liked you, haven't you? His eyes suddenly darted away, turning to the side. I continued. You think the one who falls for someone first must be the shameful one, that the passionate one, no matter what they do, always has good reasons, while the one who loves first deserves to bear all the guilt. I've never thought that. Luis leaned forward, picked up a soda bottle, and just as he was about to drink, he saw a faint lipstick stain. He instinctively looked toward Helen. Then, feeling awkward, he put the bottle down. I smiled faintly. Luis, you're pretty shameful too. Your affection is like foul sludge in the gutter, too afraid to face the sun. Yet everyone knows and turns away from the stench. Luis's face darkened. He picked up that bottle and downed it in one gulp, like he was angry. That kind of behavior was rare for him, but it only made me feel even more disgusted. I stood up. If you like someone, you can try to win them over, but don't do it by sacrificing others. Luis, I won't be your excuse anymore. It's best if we never speak again. Chapter 4. Luis didn't believe the rumors about me at school had come from Helen, nor did he think that the party, one with her written all over it, was done with ill intent. He believed I was the one maliciously accusing her. That's fine. I only showed up to tell the past one thing. It wasn't worth it. After the karaoke gathering, I focused entirely on my language courses. Near the end of the program, Helen still reached out to me. I wasn't surprised. When we met, she draped her arm over my shoulder just like always, and handed me a box of chocolates. Try one, she said. My uncle brought them from Italy. They're delicious, stuffed with nuts and super fragrant. I opened one on the spot and let it melt gently on my tongue. She slowly lowered her arm. I thought you were mad at me. I'm glad you're not, I replied calmly. Which thing are you referring to? Helen hesitated. Nothing, as long as you're not upset. Let's not dwell on the past. Then she added, by the way, Emma, why did you suddenly decide to study abroad? You never talked about your parents, and I never brought it up either, since I didn't want to upset you. Turns out I misunderstood. I didn't know you came from a wealthy and loving family. You even kept it from me. Not cool, especially since we're best friends. Best friends? That's a stretch. Luis and I had known each other since childhood. His mother and my aunt were close. My aunt was not only his teacher but also somewhat of a guardian figure. That's how Luis and I became familiar. But Luis wasn't the affectionate type. Despite knowing him for over a decade, it only took a little over a year for Helen to seem closer to me than he ever was. I said, because I'm obedient, and because of the sob story you invented for me. Always being around made people think you weren't so bad after all. I looked straight at her. Helen, I admit I had selfish reasons for always being around you. I knew Luis liked you, but he didn't have the guts to admit it. With me tagging along, he could redirect the gossip and rumors away from you. Luis never dared to admit he liked a girl with a questionable reputation. With the three of us together, he could pretend his feelings were for me. Each of us had something we were hiding. Better that it all ends here. Emma, are you insane? Helen snapped. Clearly, she didn't see it the same way. She began lashing out. You're just dull and lifeless. Pathetic. Really? You call yourself a college student? Embarrassing. I hung out with you just so I'd look better by comparison. You really thought you were anything special? She snatched the box of chocolates out of my hand. And you've got the nerve to eat them? Poor little orphan. Acting like you're going to study abroad? Everyone knows what you're really doing. With all those nightclubs around, every school's got girls moonlighting as escorts. Let's be honest, are you going abroad to study or to sell yourself? I understood immediately, so Luis never told her who I really was. That's just how he is, flawed in many ways, yet still clinging to some warped moral code. Couple that with a pretty face, and it's easy to see why he'd become someone's entire youth. I laughed at myself. The mess of right and wrong? Not worth worrying about anymore. Well, since we're being honest now, I said, let's not see each other again, ever. Helen, for your own sake, don't do anything stupid. I know a lot of your little secrets, things you really don't want getting out. Chapter 5. Helen clearly hadn't taken my words to heart. When my student visa was finally approved, I went back to school to collect some paperwork. Unexpectedly, the school refused to release it unless I brought a parent. They had access to my official records. They showed that both of my parents were alive. The principal called me into his office and said, "You've always been well behaved, quiet, respectful, never caused any problems for the school. But lately, rumors about you have been spreading like wildfire, and you've done nothing to clear the air. That silence has hurt the school's reputation. I'm very disappointed. I know you're planning to study abroad, but this is still your alma mater. We helped shape who you are. You shouldn't forget that. Otherwise, I don't know what kind of recommendation letter we're supposed to write for you." It was ridiculous, but I had no choice. I had to deal with it. The rumor had snowballed. Apparently, I wasn't really going abroad. I was dropping out to work at a nightclub. The story was that I was an orphan, tired of poverty, desperate to take a shortcut. It was convincing, believable. Walking through campus, I could hear people whispering everywhere. They said that if people like me weren't punished, it would corrupt society, that more female students would follow the same crooked path. This wasn't even the internet era yet. I could only imagine how much effort Helen had put into fueling this mess. I had gifted many things to my roommates in the past. They knew from the fabric alone that they were expensive, but in group chats, they claimed all of it came from Helen, who was kind enough to share her wealth, that I had taken her things and pretended they were mine. So now I was also being labeled a vain liar. But rumors aren't hard to crush when you have the truth. I submitted a copy of my bank statement. It showed that I'd had over 1,000,000 yuan in my account since birth. No need to do the math. In the early 90s, that amount was astronomical. Once that statement circulated, the chatter died down. I didn't bother explaining anything else. This was a top university after all, not a place where baseless gossip could thrive unchecked. Eventually, I secured all the documents I needed. Once my admission letter from Michigan arrived, I could leave for the States. By then, summer was in full swing, and school was about to break for the holidays. I thought people had moved on, but then Helen showed up at my door, eyes red and puffy from crying, and the moment I opened it, she slapped me. I turned to the person standing beside her. "This is my aunt's house. You brought someone here to hit me?" Luis frowned. "I didn't know Helen was going to do that. Can you not assume the worst of me?" He added, "Emma, don't you realize you've changed since that day in class? You've started viewing everything through a lens of suspicion. Maybe you were always like this. But you were so quiet before that no one noticed. So, was it that I never really knew the real you? Shameless." My first instinct was to call the police. But I suddenly remembered, this was a time before surveillance cameras were everywhere. There would be no witnesses. So I raised my hand and slapped back. I hit Luis. "Luis, you're not just deaf, you're blind too. Coming here out of nowhere. Acting insane, I don't welcome this. Get out, both of you." Luis stared in shock, holding my wrist. "You hit me? What the hell is wrong with you? Just because I didn't admit in public that you were my girlfriend, you've been mad ever since?" But we weren't. I wasn't wrong to deny it, was I? Our argument had made us forget Helen. She shoved between us and shouted, crying, "Luis, have you forgotten why we even came here today?" Luis's face turned cold. "Emma, apologize. Apologize to Helen." Chapter 6. I laughed bitterly. Apologize? For what? Helen sobbed as she accused me. "Emma, I treated you like a close sister, and you go behind my back. How could you imply that I'm the one who started those rumors about you? I just assumed your parents were no longer around. I wasn't the only one who thought so. Why are you blaming me?" I turned to Luis. "Did you even ask her?" He said, "Yes, there's nothing wrong with what she did. I just wanted to get clarity." "Sure, maybe there was nothing wrong," I replied. "Then let's get clear. You were the only one. And even if others thought the same, it was you who let it slip first." Helen, do you remember joking with me? Asking why I never talked about my family? Saying maybe it was because I had nothing worth mentioning? I laughed but didn't respond. And you took that as a yes. The next day, my roommates were rifling through my stuff, looking for family photos. Helen still tried to argue. "So what? That doesn't prove I said anything. Maybe they guessed it on their own." I continued calmly. "I gave a roommate a bottle of French perfume once. She told me she ran into you in the cafeteria. You looked worried. Said you were concerned about my home life. Afraid I might be repressing trauma." That very night, the whole dorm had a bedside talk session, pressuring me to spill everything about my family. That was right after school started. Military training hadn't even ended. You remember that, don't you? "Emma!" Luis suddenly exploded, his voice hoarse with anger. "You've known since then that Helen did this to you. And you still stayed friends with her for a whole year? No, wait, that was fake too, wasn't it? You've never truly cared for anyone, not her, not me, all these years. I thought I mattered to you. Turns out it was all a lie." I crossed my arms, leaning my head against the doorway as I looked at him. "What did I do to you, Luis? You knew I liked you for years. You used me, to get closer to Helen. And now you have the nerve to judge me?" Luis froze. He turned away, his Adam's apple moving as he swallowed hard. "Then don't go abroad." Chapter 7. As long as you don't go abroad. I can. I cut Luis off before he could finish. "I don't care what you can do. Who do you think you are, making demands like that? Luis, you love me. Helen's voice rose sharply, trying to drown mine out. She sounded desperate, as if her confidence had crumbled. And yet, she never lacked it. She just needed every man to love her. That was her flaw. I shut the door. I didn't want to see the conflict in Luis's eyes. Before my official admission came through, I left the country on a tourist visa. I never expected that would be the last time I saw them. Until the 1996 Atlanta Olympics, I was working as a volunteer, guiding spectators into the venue. That's when I saw Luis again. He was with Helen. That wasn't surprising. What was, though, was her pregnant belly. Luis met my gaze without flinching. He didn't try to explain. There were too many people around, and I didn't have time to deal with it anyway. After the crowd was seated, someone suddenly grabbed my arm and pulled me into a dark storage room. I didn't speak. I just listened to the sound of breathing in the shadows. Then I felt a head bury itself against my neck. Emma. His voice trembled at the end. Luis was holding back tears, trying not to let me notice. But he forgot. His tears had already trickled down my neck, pooling at my collarbone. A small puddle of grief. I gently pushed him back. I have to get back to work. He wouldn't budge. Why did you lie to me? About what? Michigan. You were never there. Aw, that. I applied to 3 schools. Michigan's climate didn't suit me, so I chose California instead. Then why didn't you tell me? Why didn't you contact me even once after you left? Emma, how could you be so heartless? I patted his shoulder. We already ended this, didn't we? Now get up. Don't make me hate you. He froze, then looked up. No, we didn't. You never even gave me a chance to say what I needed to say. I wanted to tell you, if only you stayed. I would have called you my girlfriend in front of everyone. I could never be with Helen. But you could always stay by my side. You could hold that title, my girlfriend, forever. So that's what it was. All those 70 years in the past life turned out to be nothing more than Luis tossing me a crumb of his kindness. He gave me a title, a name, so that people wouldn't ridicule me openly. No wonder. He was always more restrained than passionate. I said, then let me be clear now. Luis, I don't love you anymore. I used to only see you, but now I've looked beyond you, and the world is vast. Compared to that, you're insignificant. I'm sorry, but I really do need to get back to work. Luis wouldn't let it go. Why didn't you ask me what my relationship with Helen was? Why didn't you ask whose child she's carrying? Why didn't you ask how I found out you were never in Michigan? Emma, I came to the US for you. I didn't stop. I walked out the door, turned the corner, straightened my volunteer badge, and threw all of it behind me. It wasn't long before I got the answers to all the questions Luis had hurled at me. Helen came to find me. She told me that the day I shut the door on her and Luis. She asked him, Emma said you're too cowardly to admit you like me. Well, are you? If you're not, then break up with your so-called girlfriend and be with me. I'll be with you and only you. That day, separated by a single door. They kissed, and they were proud of it. So much so, they wanted to throw a party at the karaoke bar, to celebrate and show the world. Only, no one could reach me. I was already on a plane to the United States. Helen now sat before me, her hands cupping a coffee mug, sipping every now and then. Emma, she said, you're the one who's the real schemer. You hid everything so well. When you decided to leave, you just left, so easily, like it was nothing. You must have laughed at me plenty over the years, right? Seeing me pretend to be some rich heiress in front of you, flaunting superiority. I bet you had a field day mocking me in silence. I noticed she wasn't stopping, so I reminded her, calmly, you really shouldn't be drinking coffee right now. It'll upset your stomach. Helen's face changed. She slammed the cup down. Of course you're still kind and considerate. But Emma, what's so great about being kind? If my parents had been wealthy aristocrats before the founding of New China, and left me a fortune like yours did for you, I'd be just like you too, maybe even more generous, throwing money around, being a public benefactor. But every single thing I bragged about to you, The stuff you never even cared about. I got those at a huge cost. And you, and all those people like you, whether rich or poor, you all look down on people like me from the bottom of your hearts. If you had lived in the mud like I did, you wouldn't have turned out any better. I took a sip of coffee. Are you done? I asked. I'm not a trash bin. I don't owe her my ears. Helen blinked in disbelief. You used to listen so patiently, right? Because back then you were pathetic, madly in love with Luis. You'd do anything for him, even tolerate me, seeing my patience wearing thin. She smirked. Wanna know who the father of this baby is? It's Luis. Chapter 8. The night I flew out of the country. I wasn't in the karaoke bar. Luis shook off Helen and left. That night, Helen lost all control. Soda turned into liquor. It was wild and obscene. Helen got pregnant, and she didn't even know who the father was. She brought the pregnancy report to Luis and demanded that he take responsibility. She said if he hadn't left, the child in her womb would have been his. Because that night, she had planned to give herself to him. At the time, Helen questioned Luis. Didn't you believe me when I said I only wanted to be with you? I've had so many boyfriends, but I never gave myself to any of them. You ruined me. The drink I prepared for you, someone else drank it. Do you know I screamed myself hoarse while I was being forced? Do you want me to go into detail about what happened that night? Luis roared. Enough. But in the end, he still clenched his jaw and took responsibility. Want to know what happened to that baby? And why I'm pregnant with Luis's child now? Helen asked me, caressing her belly. I really didn't care. I set an alarm on my phone and pretended to take a call. It was still the era before flip phones became common. Helen stared at my phone, her eyes filled with tangible jealousy. I smiled lightly. Sorry, I have to go. But she didn't give up. She later sent me an email, a fairly new thing back then, detailing the whole story. Subject, about the child. Emma. Hi. I still want to explain everything to you about the child. Luis said he would take responsibility, but the next thing he did was book me an abortion. You're a woman too, you should know how humiliating that is. Just because I've dated more than a few men, I was already the target of nasty gossip. I was practically every girl's public enemy. If I really went through with the abortion, how many people would spit on me? I begged him not to make me go, but just like you, he left without a word. He went to the US to beg his father for help. His dad abandoned him and his mom when he was 2, went south to do business, married a rich girl, and later emigrated with the whole new family. He never wanted to acknowledge Luis. How shameless. Suddenly, he didn't care what people thought of him anymore. He begged his father to pull strings to get him into a university in the US. But the joke was on him. You weren't even in Michigan. He embarrassed himself for nothing. Serves him right. After I found out, I went to a shady clinic to get the abortion. Then I came to the US to find him. Before I could say or do anything, he took me in a bathroom at the airport. Emma. That's how the baby in my belly was conceived. Disgusting, isn't it? If you think so, then stay away from Luis. You have everything. Don't fight me for him. Because if you do, I'll give everything I have to take you down. Maybe even kill you, asterisk asterisk. Maybe she forgot to sign off, because she sent another email shortly after, saying the previous one was void. She rewrote everything. Only this time, maybe she was in too much of a rush. There were lots of typos and inconsistencies. Maybe she only paid for 1 hour at an internet cafe. I looked at the neat little sign-off, thanks and best wishes, and couldn't help but laugh. Then I turned to Luis, who was now sitting nervously across from me. You and Helen didn't have a great time back in China, did you? Predictable. 2 students from a prestigious university, both in their sophomore year, one, with a notoriously bad reputation, finally did something truly shocking, pregnant before marriage. The other, who appeared diligent and promising, had knocked someone up in private. In a time when society wasn't so open-minded, they became targets of mass criticism. Their sudden move to the U.S., clearly because they couldn't stay in China any longer. As for Helen's eagerness to cling to Luis, most likely because he already had U.S. citizenship. She wanted legal status. But the one helping Helen get all of this shouldn't have been Luis alone. She had so many boyfriends, so many godfathers. There should have been someone else willing to help her. Luis interrupted my thoughts. We really couldn't stay in China anymore, he said. Helen refused to go to the hospital and kept telling everyone the baby was mine. I had already let her go around announcing we were together. Even if I denied it, no one would have believed me. So I just left the country. But I never imagined I wouldn't be able to find you. He asked me if I knew what he had to do to get a chance to stay in the US. How he had to beg his father. Seeing that I wasn't the least bit interested, he laughed bitterly and changed the subject. Back then, I was furious, desperate to vent. And right then, Helen came to me. I've never stopped regretting how impulsive I was. But she got pregnant. And this time, the baby really was mine. She didn't want to get an abortion. And I couldn't force her. So I've carried that regret with me ever since. In just a few days, I'd heard enough of his and Helen's confessions. I said, call it a twist of fate, or maybe destiny. But Luis, why are you really here? He went silent for a moment. What if I told you I was reborn? Would you believe me? Chapter 9. A chill ran down my spine. I hadn't yet figured out how to respond. Luis went on speaking, as if he didn't need an answer. You should believe it. It's very likely you were reborn too. Otherwise, how do you explain how suddenly you began to hate me? 70 years, isn't that long enough to exhaust someone's patience with another? Once you're reborn, you start a whole new life. Luis thought I didn't want to repeat the path we'd taken in our past life. That now that I'd had him, I didn't value him anymore. I said, is it possible that after experiencing it all, I just realized it wasn't worth it? Or that for 70 years, I regretted over and over not having chosen a different life? And all that accumulated regret finally gave me a chance to start over. Luis's eyes flew open. He was silent for a long time before gripping his hair in pain. So that's it. But did you ever wonder why I was able to be reborn too? Maybe I was also full of regret. Regret for not choosing to love you from the very beginning. I won't lie, hearing that stirred something in me. But it didn't matter anymore. These days, my thoughts are no longer about how to make Luis love me. Besides, I started to wonder, when did Luis actually return to the past? He must have realized everything after I was no longer by his side. Yet somehow, he traced his rebirth back to me, which made no sense. Luis admitted he was reborn the night his father beat him near to death with a cane and left him outside in a rainstorm. That was when he had first arrived in the US. He was desperate. But that had nothing to do with me. I said, you should honor that resentment in your heart. In our past life, sure, you made it into a classified government agency. The pay was good. The benefits were solid. It let you live free of dependence on others. But you lived a mediocre life, just like our marriage, dull and lifeless. You spent your whole life enduring a routine without passion, enduring a life without any real highs or lows. Luis, if you truly get a second chance, then don't waste it. From now on, let's not meet again. I thought Luis and I could finally go our separate ways, never crossing paths again. But I didn't expect that. By the turn of the millennium, I would graduate and join a foreign aerospace research institute, and Luis and Helen's child would already be 4 years old. Yet somehow, the past still managed to drag us back together. Backstage at a conference, Helen had a manic episode, smashing things and shouting, until security took her away. She claimed she knew me and had scores to settle. The guards didn't make a call on their own and had her wait in a lounge until I finished my meeting. When the meeting ended, I didn't go to see her. I went straight to Luis and told him to pick her up himself. The conference was focused on aviation technology. Luis had just graduated this year and entered the institute where I worked as an intern. He sat in the audience like a background prop. He clearly didn't expect I'd notice him. When we met, he seemed flustered. Long time no see, Emma. I nodded. Your outfit today isn't quite appropriate. Did you not prepare in advance? He froze, tugging awkwardly at his clothes. The housekeeper forgot to iron my shirt, so I had to change into something else. I didn't comment. Helen's in the lounge. She caused a scene and said she came to find me. But I don't want to see her. You handle it. Luis stiffened completely. I really meant the housekeeper. Helen and I are no longer together. We only co-parent, nothing more. I replied. Okay, then go get her. Luis slammed his fist against the wall and muttered. Damn it. Then he turned back to me. You really are someone who goes all the way down a single path. In your last life, you believed you loved me, so you spent a lifetime by my side. Now in this life, you've decided you don't, and you want nothing to do with me. Maybe you don't realize it, but this version of you makes me love you even more. I'll handle Helen, but from now on, you and I will face off as equals. Emma, I want to pursue you. Sincerely, seriously. Chapter 10. I closed my eyes. After racking my brain, all I could say was, unbelievable. Luis did exactly what he said he would. Helen had no legal right to stay in the US long term. 4 years. She'd been traveling back and forth using tourist visas. Luis reported her. The border authorities no longer allowed her to enter the country. It was ruthless, but it was exactly the kind of thing Luis would do. He never agreed to marry Helen. His excuse was that he was still in school. He didn't want to repeat what had happened back home. Helen had been scared ever since. She raised the child alone and never told anyone about their relationship. So, the child remained with her in China and could no longer come to the US. Helen had no other options. She started calling me again and again, screaming, venting, insulting me. It's all your fault. You destroyed me. Why did you even have to show up in my life? If I hadn't seen you living the life you wanted so freely, I wouldn't have started questioning my own. I wouldn't have wondered if I should settle down, if I should try another path to climb higher. That's why I cut ties with my boyfriends and sugar daddies. If I hadn't, I'd still be young and pretty. I could have kept getting money from them. I could have kept living well. But now, I have a burden, a child. Luis barely gives me anything. I can't afford to take care of myself. I've turned into a worn-out woman that nobody wants. It's all because of you. You made me believe that women could live well through other means. Emma, if you've got any guts, never come back to China, because the moment you do, I'll find a way to drag you straight to hell. Helen had been living with her elderly grandmother. Her parents had been sent to the countryside during the political upheaval for reciting a poem incorrectly. They didn't survive the harsh conditions. Poverty had haunted her all her life. She was the one who truly knew what it meant to suffer, and she was also the one who chose to stray from the path. Before she even started college, Helen was already a regular at nightclubs. The first child she asked Luis to take responsibility for wasn't actually her first. The real reason she insisted on keeping her child with Luis was because she was afraid she might never be able to conceive again. When the rumors nearly cost me my opportunity to study abroad, I had considered exposing all this as a way to fight back. But then I thought, if I stooped to that level, how different would I be from Helen? So, I let it go. Fortunately, the truth came out eventually. However, at this point, if Helen still refuses to back off, then I'm not one to sit back and play the kind fool either. It's already the 21st century. Information spreads faster than ever. Destroying someone's reputation? Easier than ever. I said to her, do people back home know about your escort days? The real reason you had to flee the country wasn't the unwed pregnancy, was it? Helen immediately understood what I meant. She clenched her teeth and hissed, fine, if you don't say anything about my past, I won't cause you any more trouble when you come back to China. A deal silently struck, unexpectedly. Not long after, Helen ended up in prison. She had found work as a maid in a wealthy businessman's home. One day, while wearing a low-cut lace nightgown and scrubbing the floors, the man's wife came home early and caught her. The woman slapped her several times and kicked her out on the spot. The businessman rushed out to stop Helen, who was screaming and making a scene. In the struggle, his head hit a lawnmower. He died instantly. When Helen was arrested, she was still shouting, "Why the hell wouldn't you marry me? You deserve it. You were the one who told me to wear this. Now that your crazy wife showed up, you act like I meant nothing. What kind of man are you?" Eventually, Helen lost her mind and was committed to a psychiatric facility. Not long after, she was pushed off a high building by another patient. And that was the end of it. Chapter 11. When the news of Helen's death came, Luis was waiting outside the lab, using work as an excuse, hoping to have lunch with me. As I stepped out, he had just put away his phone. I asked, "Aren't you going back to see her?" Luis tried to take my document bag, but I avoided him. He scratched his nose awkwardly. She had nothing to do with me anymore. Why would I go? And your son? You're not going to take care of him either? He's never even called me dad once. Isn't that because you never acknowledged him? Luis. I honestly don't understand, people like us. Ordinary folks in a vast world. Why do we cling so hard to this idea of reputation? For the sake of appearances. You can even deny your own blood. Luis forced a mild tone. But how do I explain suddenly having a son? I didn't want to get involved. But growing up alone, it's too hard. Even if Luis's son is a complete stranger to me, I still wanted to speak up for him. Luis, why do you feel the need to explain anything to anyone? Life doesn't have that many spectators. People aren't constantly watching you, waiting to know your reasons and motives. Why are you always trying to justify yourself to others? Can't you just live your life for yourself? Luis stood there, dejected. He was silent for a long time. Then he said, "But that's not what the world taught me. Everything I've been through told me that unless I pleased the world, I'd never get the things I should have had. And what are those things you think you were entitled to? The title of son of a successful man? Being born into wealth? Yes. Your father abandoning you and your mother was wrong, but his success, becoming a rich businessman, he earned that himself. If he'd stayed with you and your mother, he'd probably still be selling fish at the market, reeking of fish guts all day. So why do you think that identity, that fortune, should have been yours by default?" I'd said more than enough. But clearly, Luis wasn't ready to hear it. I stopped concerning myself with him and began preparing for my return to China. No one knew why I suddenly wanted to pursue aerospace manufacturing. In my previous life, just before I closed my eyes for the last time, I learned that my parents had died when I was born. They were stationed abroad and were killed by an enemy shelling. Their bodies were never recovered. So I wanted to create a flying machine, one that would become the most advanced weapon in the world. I wanted to make my country strong. So strong that no one would ever dare ignore our identity and drop bombs on us again. The aerospace manufacturing I had always focused on was, indeed, in the field of military technology. To avoid complications when returning home, I arranged for my aunt to adopt Luis's son. I used the adoption paperwork as an excuse to go back. Luis wanted to follow me, but after I submitted a report to the institute's leadership, he was kept behind. He couldn't prove any legal relationship to the child. Without a valid reason, it's nearly impossible for a foreign national to get leave from that kind of institute. When they realized I wasn't planning to return to the U.S., and that I was negotiating with domestic research institutions, the American side sent Luis back to persuade me. I never imagined that one day, Luis would be imprisoned for espionage. After several failed attempts to convince me, he received new orders, first gain entry into a Chinese research institute, then slowly infiltrate it. Unfortunately, he was caught stealing internal data by me. I reported it to the relevant authorities in time. After being taken away, he insisted on seeing me before he would confess everything. He said, "Emma, your obsession with reincarnation wasn't because of me, right?" I replied, "Correct. Love, whether big or small, is always worth waiting for with passion. I love my parents, and I love my country. But you, I haven't felt that kind of love for you in a long time." He bent over, his shoulders trembling uncontrollably. "Originally, I thought if I could just make it back to the U.S., I'd get promoted, win awards, gain my father's approval, and secure a share of his inheritance. But I never expected it would end like this. Utter ruin." Then something struck him, and he shook his head repeatedly. "No, you once said there's no such thing as originally. There's no such thing as what should have been. Nothing is more earth-shattering than being reborn. But even after starting over, I still didn't get what I wanted. All I have left is regret. We shouldn't place our hopes on what could have been, nor on a second life. We should live like we only have this one. Live it well, live without regrets." I let out a sigh. Thankfully, this time, there was nothing I regretted.